tonight what the media won't explain, why poor little Rocket Man is just showing now his ego is bruised. And meanwhile, while those in the left-wing media are going nuts, well, President Trump, watch and learn. He's had the upper hand the entire time. Also breaking right now, President Trump's attorney, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, is now telling NBC News that a potential presidential interview with Robert Mueller is in a, quote, holding pattern. Plus, the president is demanding that Congress do something, keep their promises for once, build the southern border wall. And also tonight, the Russia collusion hoax continues to unravel. The House Intel Committee Chairman, Devin Nunes, he is now saying there was never credible evidence for the FBI to even launch an investigation into Trump campaign associates. And also brand new tonight, more monumental setbacks for Robert Mueller's imploding witch hunt and new evidence that the DOJ is in fact stonewalling even further. The DOJ meeting with House Chairman Devin Nunes, Trey Gowdy, to view classified Russia probe material is no longer happening tomorrow. It's been rescheduled for next week. More obstructionism, all of that, plus another major win for the Trump administration. The American hero, Gina Haspel, has now secured the votes needed. She will be the next CIA director and will call out the mainstream media's lies about what's really going on between Israel and the Palestinians. That and even more in tonight's breaking news opening monologue. All right, the media of the left, they are going insane tonight over reports that the North Korean dictator, Little Rocket Man, Kim Jong-un, is threatening to pull out of the planned June 12 summit with President Trump over U.S. and South Korean military drills. Now, Kim Jong-un also reportedly canceled pre-planned talks with South Korea. Now, before all of you left-wing liberal activists work yourselves into a frenzy, let me give you the truth and some facts. The State Department and Heather Nauert is saying that this summit in Singapore is going on as planned. That's one. And the Pentagon is adding that these military exercises are going to continue. The big takeaway that the left refuses to understand is this. President Trump is already winning without giving anything up in return. So you idiot ideologues in the Destroy Trump media, you need to watch, learn how to negotiate. Let's see. The president got 3 American hostages out, and he didn't have to send over cargo planes full of cash and other currencies like Barack Obama did with the mullahs. New satellite images are now showing North Korea is already dismantling their nuclear test site. And as we have told you, Kim Jong-un is inviting the Western media to watch as he decommissions that nuclear facility. Also, Kim Jong-un, guess what? Wow, he's no longer firing missiles over Japan. He's not threatening Guam. He's not threatening the continental U.S. and the rest of the world. And yes, you saw it with your own eyes. Well, Little Rocket Man walked across the DMZ to greet South Korea's president. And what did President Trump give up in return for all of this? Nothing. President Trump is not naive like Bill Clinton, Barack Obama. They tried to bribe these despots and dictators with billions and hundreds of billions of dollars. What we're seeing here is typical quintessential Reagan. Trust but verify. In action. Before your very eyes. Now, if Kim Jong-un wants to come to the table, then fine. We know the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, he has laid out all the details, all the terms for a possible agreement, and that includes complete and total denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And if Little Rocket Man doesn't want to comply, well, then he has to face the consequences. And President Trump has made clear North Korea is not going to get away with threatening the world, and he will never be able to fully develop a nuclear weapon. Here's my prediction tonight. Kim Jong-un, well, he's being a little petulant. He's posturing. He's doing a little saber rattling before he ultimately capitulates, goes to the table. Now, even more breaking news to tell you about tonight. President Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, the former New York City mayor, he's telling NBC News that he has spoken with Mueller and his partisan team of witch hunters in the past 24 hours. He's now saying that a potential presidential interview is being put in a holding pattern, which is great news. Mueller has no business ever questioning the president of the United States. There's no such thing as collusion. Although there might be with Mueller and that oligarch guy. I'll explain. Now, remember the leaked special counsel question? Asking Trump what he thought, how he felt. How did you feel? Well, those are ridiculous questions. Mueller's clearly setting in that case a perjury trap. No good lawyer would let the president be interviewed under those conditions. And also tonight, the president, he's continuing to keep his promises to you, the American people. the forgotten men and women that the media never thought would show up in November of 2016. And he's now calling on Congress to do their job. Secure the border. Do it now. Take a look.
The first duty of government is to protect our citizens, and the men and women of DHS are on the front lines of this incredible, heroic fight. That is why we are calling on Congress to secure our borders, support our border agents, stop sanctuary cities, and shut down policies that release violent criminals back into our communities. We don't want it any longer.
No, we don't. We need to protect the American people. Now, President Trump, he has already accumulated an amazing record of accomplishments for every Republican, if they're smart, that they can run on in November, and this would just be another key victory. Look at the economy, record low levels of unemployment, optimism at 11-year high. The president's poll numbers, the highest he's had in his presidency. And there's their promises that are kept on the Iranian deal, on the embassy in Jerusalem, on tax cuts, on killing the Obamacare individual mandate. And there are positive results all over the place. And by the way, it hasn't even been 2 years. Also tonight, this is major. The Russia collusion hoax is unraveling, as we predicted, right before our eyes. The House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes, he is offering up new proof that the entire thing has always been a witch hunt. Chairman Nunes is now saying that there was never any credible evidence for the FBI to begin probing the Trump campaign. Now we know there was a spy, supposedly, on top of the FISA abuse. He never had any right to do this in the first place. Take a look.
We have yet to see any credible evidence or intelligence that led to the opening of this investigation. I believe they never should have opened a counterintelligence investigation into a political party. Counterintelligence investigations are very rarely do they happen, and when they do happen, you have to be very careful because you're using the tools of our intelligence services and relationships with other countries in order to spy on a political campaign. Probably not a good idea.
The powerful tools of intelligence used to spy on an opposition party candidate, and those powerful tools used against Americans, no, that can't happen here. So there was never any actual credible evidence to launch this investigation. And of course, Rod Rosenstein conflicted. This is a stunning statement by Devin Nunes. And that's on top of course, the FBI, the DOJ, lying, misleading FISA judges multiple times in order to get a FISA warrant to spy on a Trump campaign associate in the weeks leading up to an election. And for an entire year, 4 judges lied to. They never were told the truth. They never told it was a bought and paid for Clinton dossier that was not verified, not corroborated. And now there's a new dynamic to this massive scandal. Now the possibility of an FBI mole that was inside the Trump campaign. Now Chairman Nunes is now investigating this huge development. Take a look.
You had Fusion GPS that was hired by the Democratic Party in the Clinton campaign to draw up a dossier on the president, or as the president was running for president. What happened with that is that in his testimony, he mentioned that there was a source within the campaign.
Glenn Simpson, who runs Fusion GPS.
Glenn Simpson said that in public, what was closed testimony, then it became public. Now he's confirmed that he was telling Congress the truth, which is probably a good idea. We believe he was telling the truth. And what we're trying to do is get the documents to figure out, did they actually have, what methods were used to open this counterintelligence investigation.
That is an amazing statement. We have been saying that this scandal is the biggest abuse of power scandal and corruption scandal in American history, and that we have been uncovering this and peeling back the onion. This is only the beginning. You got to sit tight and buckle up, because everything that the media, the Democrats, have been telling you for well over a year is now getting flipped on its head, and all of it, as we told you at the beginning of this year, is boomeranging back on them. Now, while the real Russia scandal is expanding, well, Robert Mueller's witch hunt is crumbling. Now, it's reaching embarrassing levels. Let's run through some of the recent headlines. At Mueller's probe's first trial, expect more blunt lectures from the bench. Now, that judge, T.S. Ellis III, already smacked down in epic fashion Mueller's team, calling them out for trying to flip Paul Manafort on an effort unrelated. It had to do with the Ukraine and tax fraud from 2005. What does that have to do with Trump-Russia collusion? The Washington Times indicted firm Mueller trying to justify his own existence and indict a Russian, any Russian. These court transcripts reportedly show Robert Mueller indicted a Russian company. It didn't exist at the time, they said. Now, this is now showing that Mueller's original indictment was nothing more than an illusion to make it seem like there was some sort of Russia collusion. Mueller never anticipated that the Russians were going to call his bluff. This is a huge embarrassment for him. And now there are the special counsel. They look foolish because his team was never prepared, as Andy McCarthy said. It was all for show. Byron York out with this piece. 1 year down, and it's still Mueller time. And he writes that Russia probe has now been going on for almost 3 years, and there is not one indication what this entire investigation is really about. Now, here's what we do know. After all of this time, there is zero evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. It's been a witch hunt, it is a witch hunt, and it is a total sham. And for the sake of the country, it needs to end. And then we have key updates to John Solomon's explosive report that we brought you last night about the FBI Director Mueller actually working with the Russian billionaire Oleg Deripaska is his name, now part of the investigation. He was working with him. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong. I'm going to defend Robert Mueller on this. He and other FBI agents, they were trying to free a former FBI retiree, a CIA operative. His name is Robert Levinson from Iran. He was being held hostage. Now, I'm happy that he was working with the Russian billionaire, the oligarch, that he somehow convinced the oligarch to give him $25 million to help save an American being held hostage. I have no problem with that at all. The government should do everything possible in that situation. I'll give Mueller credit. It was the right thing to do. Here's the issue. It's just a massive conflict of interest. And that's what we're calling Mueller's Russian collusion here. You know what? If you're going to talk about a guy in a Manafort case that you worked with, that you secured $25 million from, I think you need to reveal something like that. Now, John Solomon reporting tonight that Russian oligarch is one of the first people the FBI actually interviewed when they began investigating the Clinton bought and paid for dossier. And as Solomon and others are now exposing, the Russian actually told the FBI the idea of Russian collusion was false. So now the question is, did the FBI tell the FISA courts that a former trusted source of theirs told them that there was nothing to this Russia collusion when they were applying for those 4 FISA warrants? The original application and 3 subsequent applications, all using the bulk of information from the Clinton bought and paid for unverified dossier with Russian lies. They lied about it to the FISA court to spy on an American citizen, an opposition party campaign member. Now, another developing story to tell you about tonight. The meeting between the DOJ and the House Committee Chairman Devin Nunes and Trey Gowdy that was reportedly scheduled for next week, well, that's not happening. Why? Now, Nunes and Gowdy were again supposed to see the 1.2 million classified documents and information that they have been requesting about the Russia investigation. At this hour, it's unclear why this meeting is no longer happening, but what is clear is that Rod Rosenstein, the Department of Justice, they have been stonewalling Congress every single step of the way. And the DOJ is also trying to sabotage the work that people like Nunes, Goodlatte, Gowdy are doing with anonymous leaks. They want to slow roll this until the midterms, hoping Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats take over the House, so then they won't reveal any of this. Now, also tonight, Fox News is learning that Congress has received information from the DOJ that it requested regarding Comey's buddy. Remember that professor over at Columbia University, now his attorney, Daniel Richman. Remember, he was he had special government employee status. Former Obama deep state DOJ official Sally Yates, interestingly, she's going after the president, claiming that he's, quote, tearing down the legitimacy of the DOJ. Sally, you're probably watching. But you and the rest of your deep state cronies, you have already done enough damage. And the sad part is that rank and file, FBI, CIA, intelligence, their reputations are smeared because of deep state operatives at the upper echelon and the misdeeds that they did in all of this that we have now proven on this show. And maybe, Sally, you're forgetting you were emailing with Mueller's pit bull, Andrew Weissman. And Yates is also one of the corrupt officials that signed off on at least one of the FISA warrants that was unverified, uncorroborated. So congratulations, Sally. You've done enough damage to the DOJ, more than any president ever could. And one more thing tonight. Trump-hating former CIA director John Brennan is being called out by two of his former colleagues over his public statements about the Clinton bought and paid for dossier. Paul Sperry reporting that two former top officials are actually contradicting Brennan's claim that the dossier did not play a role in the intelligence community's assessment of Russian election meddling. Now, Sperry is pointing out that former NSA Director Mike Rogers told Congress the dossier did, in fact, play a role in the intel assessment. And former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper admitted something similar to CNN. And we know Clapper and Brennan have both lied. So it looks like Brennan, once again, is caught lying. Now, I guess this isn't surprising from a guy who once voted for the communists for president of the United States. How he ever got that position is beyond any understanding I have. Anyway, finally tonight, last thing. President Trump is on the verge of another huge victory. This is good news for all of us. Gina Haspel now has the votes to be the next CIA director. And the fact that it took this long, just a few weeks ago, Democrats, for them to support her, now is pretty disgraceful on their part. Gina Haspel was an American hero. She helped keep us safe after 9/11. She helped get the intelligence to find bin Laden. And here's another fact the left will never admit. Enhanced interrogation of the three people under medical supervision worked. It gave us the valuable intel, allowed us to get to the courier, which took us right to bin Laden. Democrats should have been praising Haspel. Actually, they were at the time, because she's more than qualified. Here with reaction, we have columnist for The Hill, investigative reporter John Solomon, Fox News contributor, investigative reporter Sarah Carter, the author of the soon #1 New York Times bestseller, soon to be released, The Russia Hoax. Fox News, what's the rest of the book? That's the best part.
The illicit scheme to clear Hillary Clinton and frame Donald Trump. It was a hoax brought to you by James Comey and his pal Robert Mueller, who continues to run with it.
And it's becoming more clear every day.
Yeah, every day new facts emerge. There was never any evidence for a criminal investigation of Trump. There was never any intelligence for a counterintelligence investigation.
Nunes was so clear on that.
The facts were invented and exaggerated. The law was perverted and ignored. And now the Department of Justice and the FBI are trying to cover it up by refusing to give over documents to Congress.
You know, John Solomon, let me go back to this Russian oligarch story, and I may surprise people. Any effort to save an American hero being held hostage in Iran, I'm in favor of. And if Robert Mueller, then FBI director, was able to convince the Russian oligarch to hand over $25 million in an effort to release this American hero, I applaud him for that. It's the hypocrisy, as this oligarch is at the center of the Manafort case in many ways, and this oligarch wasn't mentioned, nor was the connection mentioned. How important is that?
Yeah, there are three things that people are saying to me today since the story broke last night. I think the first is Donald Trump recently sanctioned Oleg Deripaska as part of the Russia sanctions. Did his State Department, did his Treasury Department tell him this was the man that helped the FBI? Did they also tell him this was the man that tried to clear Donald Trump's name in September 2016 when he told the FBI there's no collusion between Russia and Donald Trump's campaign? There's no way. That's very important. Second thing that's really important, you hit it in your monologue. Did they tell the FISA court that they had a trusted Russian source that was waving them off collusion before they went and got the search warrants? Here's the third and most interesting thing that intelligence people told me tonight, Sean. If Deripaska had this interaction with the FBI, it is almost 100% certain he called Russia when he got back home and said, hey, the FBI thinks you're colluding. That would give Russian intelligence a chance to have fun with John Brennan's CIA and try to feed them misinformation. And that is something that a couple of members of Congress told me today they're looking at. Did Deripaska actually tip off the Russians enough so that they could feed the U.S. intelligence a false narrative and create doubt in our country? Those are three pretty powerful changes.
Well, we know they sowed discord, but we also know that no votes were changed, and we've had a couple of reports confirming that. Sarah, I want you to weigh in on that, and more importantly, update us if you can. Did the FBI have a spy on top of the FISA court abuses within the Trump campaign in this election cycle?
Yes, I believe they did have an informant, somebody that was reporting back to them, and that's according to the sources that I've been speaking with. And this informant was somebody that was very well known to the CIA and to the FBI.
Would I recognize the initials?
You might recognize the initials, and I think it's out there a little bit right now. Remember, this is highly sensitive, and you won't get anybody over at DOJ actually verifying this. Any source that does leak out this information is putting themselves in a little bit of jeopardy, and I think that's why Congress has been so careful as to not release his name publicly yet. This is why Chairman Nunes and others like Trey Gowdy are fighting so hard to get all the information out, Sean.
Why did we have this delay? Why? They had an agreement. What happened?
Well, they had an agreement, but the agreement that they had has been broken over and over again, and this is what we know. You just got to go back to the beginning, Sean, you know, and Chairman Nunes brought this up, and it's very important. They opened a counterintelligence investigation, the special counsel, and remember, it was Comey, and Rod Rosenstein was the one that wrote the letter to President Trump asking for Comey to be fired, and then he appoints a special counsel to investigate why Comey was fired by President Trump. A pattern here that I see is a constant pattern of being set up. Yes, we constantly keep seeing setups, right? So if we want to go to why, they want to know who this source is. That's the reason why. And I can tell you a little bit. It has to do with London. It has to do with George Papadopoulos, although he is not. And I repeat again, he was not the mole. But it does have to do with him. And so this is the reason why we need all of these answers.
Let's talk about the legality.
One of the great myths was that, perpetuated by the New York Times, was that Papadopoulos' bar conversation with an Australian diplomat is what triggered...
Four-way hearsay.
Yeah, is what triggered the Trump-Russia collusion investigation by the FBI. No. The first in the sequence of events was the FBI meeting face-to-face in London with Christopher Steele, the author of this fictitious fabricated dossier.
They never told the courts they fired him. They never told that,
No, of course, they deceived the courts, and they concealed evidence of that and other things.
We'll give the last word tonight to John Solomon. By the way, we welcome you back. We've been missing in action, Mr. Solomon. We welcome you back to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, I think Greg has it on the money. The timeline undercuts the entire narrative that we were fed during the campaign and right after the campaign. George Papadopoulos was after they had already talked to Christopher Steele. He's got it right.
You guys have been right from the beginning. It was March 7th, 2017 that you guys broke the Pfizer story, and we have now, everything's been proven true and more than we ever thought. Thank you. Great work. I can't wait for the book. When we come back, a live report. North Korea threatening to cancel their summit with the president. I have a mini monologue coming up, and Joe Concha, Dan Bongino, and so much more. Stay with us. All right, Kim Jong-un, little rocket man, threatening to cancel his upcoming summit with President Trump, scheduled to take place next month in Singapore. Joining us from the White House, Fox News correspondent Kristen Fisher is with us tonight. The president already got a lot of concessions, and I have a funny feeling he'll be there.
Well, see, Sean, you know, this is really a big shift in tone from the North Koreans. Just 5 days ago, President Trump was thanking North Korean leader Kim Jong-un for releasing those 3 Americans ahead of next month's big summit. And now the North Koreans are threatening to cancel that summit because of joint ongoing military drills between the U.S. and the South Koreans. Now, these kinds of drills are very common. The State Department says that the North Koreans were well aware of and seemingly fine with these drills, so they're not really sure what's changed.
We have not heard anything from that government or the government of South Korea to indicate that we would not continue conducting these exercises or that we would not continue planning for our meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong-un next month.
Now, all the U.S. has to go off of is this statement from North Korea's news agency, which questions, quote, the fate of the planned North Korea-U.S. summit in light of this provocative military ruckus. That's what they're calling these ongoing joint military drills. So in response, all the White House has said is that it is aware of that report, while the State Department says that it is continuing to go ahead. It is continuing to prepare and plan for next month's summit in Singapore. Sean, they still have about 4 weeks to work all this out.
All right, Kristen, thanks for that report at the White House tonight. Meanwhile, today, the New York Daily News put out an outrageous cover featuring the first daughter, Ivanka Trump. It reads, "Daddy's little ghoul," paper slamming Ivanka for being, quote, all smiles at the opening of the new U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem while there were deadly clashes going on in Gaza. And other members of the Trump-hating media also predictably chiming in, offering their displeasure about the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, which so many other presidents promised and never delivered. Watch this.
Tens of thousands of Palestinians held angry demonstrations yesterday, furious after the U.S. Embassy was moved to Jerusalem.
Palestinians have been protesting here against their lack of freedom for weeks. But their fury boiled over on Monday when the U.S. Embassy was officially moved to Jerusalem with President Trump's blessing.
Today, there is shock and sorrow and rage at that decision by President Trump to move the embassy to Jerusalem. It feels, for the whole region, like a fateful step.
55 people killed yesterday.
58.
58, and you had a split screen of what looked like a VIP tent at the Belmont Stakes. And they don't care. Seemed totally oblivious to what was going on.
When he announced the move to the embassy, I said there will be blood on his hands, not because he pulled the trigger, but because he destabilized the region with not having any clue about what he was doing.
You cannot have peace and a peace process without Palestinian involvement. You cannot have it. And so if you choose a side and you say, this is what I'm going to do, you're effectively saying you are not going to work for peace.
And maybe they don't really want it. Maybe they don't really want it.
Time for a Hannity tutorial, because the media seems to have forgotten that those Hamas-inspired protesters that were hurling rocks and firebombs at Israeli soldiers, okay, this is the same Hamas they never report that continues to call for the destruction of Israel. Oh, it's in their charter. They also pay the families of terrorists that literally kill Israelis and inflict pain and suffering on the people of Israel and Americans, too. Now, they use women and children as shields, and Hamas also receives support as the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism. They get support from Iran. Here with reaction, NRA TV contributor, former Secret Service agent Dan Bongino, and from the Hill, Joe Concha. Dan, we'll start with you and the whole issue. Hamas charter calls for the destruction of Israel. They were elected by the Palestinians. They elected a terrorist organization supported by terrorist dollars.
Yeah, Sean, the media is just a propaganda arm here of Hamas. It's disgusting. It makes me sick. Sean, it's not a demonstration. It's not a protest when you show up with bombs. They were warned to stay away from the border fence. They decided to show up with explosives. You know, listen, for the liberals out there, the things that go boom and kill people, they were warned multiple times. And then when the Israelis engaged to defend the border, by the way, they established, after they gave the land back to Hamas, to the Palestinians, which they promptly used to shoot rockets into Israel. They defended their borders. Good for the Israelis. The media should be ashamed and embarrassed of themselves. I'm surprised Hamas doesn't have a desk in their newsroom.
I've been to the Gaza border. I've been where the tunnels where they use Israeli cement and electricity, Joe. I don't know many in the media that have done that. I've been to a town called Sarot, where 10,000 rockets were fired in 10 years and kids can't play outside. They have bunker playgrounds because there's not enough time from the border if a rocket is fired. 10,000 in one city in 10 years.
And yet, Sean, the Daily News continues to be, and Ben Shapiro said something similar like this before on this network, the propaganda arm for Hamas. Now, look, I've lived in the New York City area for a few decades, and the New York Daily News has always been seen as a joke to anybody who has any objectivity and a brain. They were teetering on bankruptcy for years, and it just leads to not only the fact that I know that media, and we say this many times, is distrusted at record levels. Among Republicans, it's more than 90%. And even among independents and Democrats, there's a majority that don't distrust or that mistrust the media. The problem is now that we're even at a loathing stage of the media like we've never seen before because of dishonesty like this and blaming Ivanka Trump and juxtaposing her with what's going on in Gaza as if she's smiling at death. It is pathetic, and it is the only word I can apply here.
Really well said, Dan. Last word.
Sean, the Israelis gave the Palestinians Gaza back. They used it to launch rockets into Israel. And now they told them, stay away from the border fence. They showed up with bombs, Sean. They showed up with bombs, and now they're using the media to advance their own narrative. It's disgusting. They're such suckers
really
in the
is.
media.
You both are so on target tonight. Thank you both. When we come back, Rush Limbaugh, an incredible monologue exposing the deep state forces that are trying to take down this president. Also, Jesse Waters, Jessica Tarla, a busy Hannity. Do not ever touch that dial. Please. Pretty please.
This was just circular firing squad, in a sense, circular intel, if you will. They plant, essentially, what they want to be attributed to the Trump administration. They plant it in a peripheral Trump foreign policy advisor. Then they arrange a meeting for him with an Australian ambassador, who then hears this news, and we're off to the races. And none of it is real. None of it. And the collusion has fallen apart, and the obstruction. There isn't any obstruction. The president cannot obstruct by doing his constitutional duties. So what we're left with here is look at the lengths to which these people have gone to, A, prevent Trump from winning, and then after that, doing their best to get rid of him.
All right, that was Rush on his show, rightly calling out the corruption on Russia probe and explaining what this is really all about. Thank God people understand it. With reaction, the co-host of The Five. Oh, he actually has two shows, excuse me. And the host of Waters, Waters World, we live in it. Jesse Waters and Fox News contributor Jessica Tarla. All right, I'm going to start with you tonight. Rush is right.
No.
Tell Jesse where he's wrong.
Well, I'll tell you both. Rush is wrong because the Mueller probe is not over. So the idea that you could
say after Rush is wrong is wrong.
All right, 10-point win, 10-point victory.
That is
He's
so
winning.
unfair here. There are, 19 indictments. I know they are not
Nothing
for
to do with collusion.
No, the probe is focusing on 3 issue areas: Russia collusion, obstruction of justice, and financial crimes. None of those have been settled. You do not have a report.
The only thing that Trump obstructed was Hillary getting into the White House. If Hillary had won, she would have fired Comey on day one, and we never would have heard about.
Slow down. Say that again.
What?
The only obstruction was Hillary getting in the White House.
Yeah, the only thing Trump obstructed was Hillary getting into the White House.
Have you used that before? It is not.
Yeah, it is. All right, let me ask you a question. So Mueller indicts these 13 bot companies. It turns out one wasn't even a company at the time.
Oops.
Yeah.
Oops.
I saw that.
Yeah, and he never expected that they were going to actually respond, and now they're going to have discovery, and I'm predicting Mueller's going to have to yank the indictments. Yeah.
Okay, so then we'll go down to 6, right, if my math is correct?
Well, 13 will be gone.
Right, so we had 19. Isn't 19 minus 6 13?
Yeah, and what about the judge that talked about the 2005 tax case that had to do with the Ukraine, not Russia, and that they were trying to use it to squeeze and tighten the screws on Manafort to turn on Trump for prosecution or impeachment?
Yeah.
2005.
Mueller's had more contacts with Russian oligarchs than Trump has.
All right, that's absolutely untrue.
And
he
he's
ran a
had
beauty
to fire
pageant
2
there.
biased agents, Strzok and Page, because they were so corrupt. And the rest of his team's all Democrat donors. Way to stack the
Bob
deck.
Mueller
he's
himself
not
is a
had- he's not
Republican.
great track record.
Rod Rosenstein is a Republican.
He's a Republican
Everyone
in name only, I would say.
All right, so if someone is in,
He's as much of a
you
Republican
don't even know what he is. Maybe
as
he likes
Comey
President.
is a Republican.
No, he is not a Comey. He is not a Republican.
I don't mean to be. You better swing back. This is the biggest debate win ever.
You asked for food last week. You said,
trying to bribe the judge right here. Is this In-N-Out Burger?
No, it's Chick-fil-A because it wouldn't have been good from Thursday to today, and I was flying back.
All right, she got 10 points back. What do you got?
10 points.
What do you have?
I don't know.
10
points. It's like 100 points plus 850. I've also never entered a Chick-fil-A before. You know, liberals hate their sauce. I got sauce.
Oh, you got sauce?
They said the Chick-fil-A sauce is the right move.
I'm not feeling very confident about this performance.
How does
this might be the one loss I take.
Wait, let's all come up with a hand signal for me now, since I've
You gotta win. How about this?
That was the best line ever.
Wait,
Man,
excuse me.
He's had three killer lines on the show. Not even this great sandwich can beat that.
I went into a Chick-fil-A for the first time for you. And it,
How was it good?
It was good. I had the nuggets.
Favorite.
They were delicious. Oh, see?
You know what?
Thank
Let her
you,
win.
James.
She brought you a sandwich. Let her win.
Okay.
Give it to her.
I said
this
that
is
wasn't
not
fair.
Wait a minute. We don't give participation trophies, and you can't bribe the judges.
Okay, I'll take the W then.
You give him conservative points every week. Like, oh,
I'm going to
Jesse
say
loves
this
Trump, so Jesse wins.
As a person, it's Jessica's world, but in terms of the debate, it's Jesse's, and you live in it.
I had like 3 minutes.
No, you got to do it.
No, my thing at least.
You can't do that to yourself.
Whatever.
Oh, you got to.
Can we go back to the probe? Because I got more to say about Russia.
Do you really want to?
Do we have time?
Yeah,
Do you really need to?
Oh, I got to go.
Sure you want to?
It's over?
It's
Eat
over.
your
Perfect
sandwich.
timing.
I'm going to eat my sandwich. Thank you, by the way.
You're very welcome.
All right, coming up. Well, more on North Korea's threat to cancel its summit with President Trump. Spit, spit, spit. Brett Baer's next. A special report. So, with Little Rocket Man trying to threaten to pull out of the upcoming summit with President Trump due to the ongoing military exercises that he knew about between South Korea and the U.S., well, despite this recent development, President Trump has made a massive improvements and gains in the Korean Peninsula. And by the way, some would argue his tough talk, his military presence, his sanctions all work. Take a listen.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen. The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime. This shouldn't be handled now, but I'm going to handle it because we have to handle it. Little Rocket Man, we're going to do it because we really have no choice.
What's amazing is the president's tough rhetoric towards North Korea proves what Ronald Reagan spoke about in the 1980s concerning the evil empire, the Soviet Union, when he talked about peace through strength, trust but verify. Watch this.
There is one sign the Soviets can make that would be unmistakable, that would advance dramatically the cause of freedom and peace. General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
His own aides didn't want him to say those words. You can't forget Reagan's trust but verify approach towards the evil empire. Take a look.
We have listened to the wisdom in an old Russian maxim, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. Mr. General Secretary, though my pronunciation may give you difficulty, the maxim is dovayai no provayai, trust but verify.
Even Gorbachev laughing. All right, why this is significant, there's a brand new book out. It's amazing. It's called 3 Days in Moscow. Ronald Reagan and the Fall of the Soviet Empire. You know him well. He's the anchor of Special Report, our friend Brett Baer. It's so good to see him. People think that we're not friends. Every newspaper, don't they have a news section, local, international, national?
That's right.
And they have a sports section?
That's exactly right.
And they have an editorial page?
They do indeed.
Am I the editorial page?
You are indeed.
And you're the news page?
That's right.
This is an amazing book because it's so relevant to Iran and North Korea and even the opening of the embassy in Jerusalem.
Listen, remember those times when Reagan was speaking out about the evil empire, about the ash heap of history that communism would be. You know, joking at times, getting caught like the bombing is going to start tomorrow. Heads were exploding in Washington at the time.
Sound familiar?
Heads are exploding in Washington. Now, if June 12th holds and the summit in Singapore happens, June 12th is historic. June 12th, 1987 is when Reagan delivers the Brandenburg Gate speech, tear down this wall, Mr. Gorbachev. And that changed the world. Those summits and the collection of them, you know, changed our history. It's possible.
You know, look at what already the president, without flying in cargo planes of cash and other currencies, like Obama did, or Clinton with the energy aid to Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il. But this president talked tough, put a military presence, also a relationship with the Chinese president, and sanctions in place. Didn't that really all contribute to Kim Jong-un's decision here?
I would think so. Now, the caveat is the North Koreans don't have a great history living up to their promises. So the president has said he's going to sit at the table and walk away if the deal's not right.
Oh, just like Reykjavik.
And just like Reykjavik. I mean, the similarities are really stark. Personalities are different. I don't think Reagan would love Twitter, but who knows? Maybe he would. But he did say those bold things that changed the paradigm. And maybe the paradigm's shifting now.
I've always studied Reagan. The thing is, they said he was a California cowboy. They said he would start World War III. They said Reaganomics would result in the collapse of the economy. 21 million new jobs were created. We doubled revenues to the federal government and had the longest period of peacetime economic growth in history. Do you see the similarities? I know I'm dragging you a little into opinion. Do you see similarities?
I do, and I say it in the book. The last word of this book, I draw...
I didn't get to that page yet. I'm only halfway through.
You're getting there.
Yeah.
But if you look at the words of big speeches of President Trump, the speech in Warsaw, Poland, the speech in Riyadh, the United Nations speech, the State of the Union speech, they have phrases and terminology that you could actually hear Reagan delivering. Now, I'm not saying that President Trump is President Reagan. President Reagan is
very
President
different
Trump.
personalities, obviously.
But they have similar moments and challenges that they're facing.
Peace through strength, trust but verify, tax cuts. Now we've had the Trump tax cuts, originalists on the Supreme Court, securing the border. I don't believe that this president is a nationalist populist, as some have said. I believe he is a Reagan conservative. The things that I just mentioned, energy independence, are all things that Reagan believed in. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong, and I also think that there is the possibility that this president has the ability to reach out to Democrats and make some deals that Reagan would make with Tip O'Neill and others.
All right, the book is fascinating. I'm saying this is not only as a friend. I really have always loved Reagan. It is an amazing read, and it's so relevant, ripped from today's headlines, and so many similarities. It's a great book. How much crap do you take for me being opinionated?
On a scale of 1 to 10?
Yeah,
or,
on a scale of 1 to 10.
You know, it's a good 6.
Just tell everybody your news, I'm opinion. Every newspaper has a news section, sports section, and a Hannity section.
I do.
Oh.
I do.
Great book.
Thanks, man.
All right, when we come back, incredible footage of a U.S. missile strike that took place and took out a senior al-Qaeda terrorist. Our video of the day comes to us courtesy of our great Department of Defense. Check out the footage of a U.S. military strike from April. It shows a senior al-Qaeda terrorist and his bodyguard getting wiped